Charlie Sykes. More questions than answers about why an airliner was shot down. Sunday Insight starts right now. Good morning and welcome to Sunday Insight. In the week that was, a Malaysian airliner shot down over Ukraine. Israel launches a ground invasion of Gaza. The border continues to be flooded with unaccompanied minors, and the federal government begins moving them via bus and plane across the country. Hundreds may end up in Wisconsin. International soccer comes to Miller Park and draws a crowd of 31,000. Governor Scott Walker calls for the repeal of Common Core and replacing it with Wisconsin standards. And a new ad in the governor's race targets Mary Burke's reliance on outsourcing of jobs to China for her wealth. But first, we start with a dramatic anniversary. 45 years ago today, man first stepped on the moon. July 20th, 1969, Apollo 11.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
President John F. Kennedy's pledge to put a man on the moon by the end of the 1960s and was the dramatic culmination of the Cold War era space race. But it was a mission that cost billions of dollars, and the United States has essentially now mothballed its space program. So this morning, we'll talk about two questions. Was it worth it, and should we ever go back? Joining me on our panel this morning, Mikel Holt with the Milwaukee Community Journal, political consultant Mary Jo Baas, Susie Falk with the Falk Group Public Relations, and Brian Sikma with Media Trackers. Brian, we'll start with you. I'll ask you the two questions. Was it worth it, and should we go back?
Absolutely yes to both questions, Charlie. I mean, it was worth it. The space race was actually the most peaceful endeavor in the race between the two superpowers during the Cold War. You had the tensions flaring in Korea and Vietnam and elsewhere around the world, but the space race was kind of this all-American apolitical event that allowed the U.S. to show off its technical superiority. We got a late start, but we ended up catching the ultimate prize, which was putting a man on the moon.
Okay, but then why go back?
Well, Charlie, exploration is always something that man has always had a dream of doing, and I think it's worthwhile to invest in it. I think today, though, a lot of that can be funded by private research. We're at a point now where during the Cold War, it was funding military research as an important part of national security. Now the private sector can do it.
Mikel Holt, was it worth it?
Space, the last frontier. These are the voyages. You know, I was actually around when the launch actually took place. And it was, as you said,
some of us were around. Yeah, we can tell.
It actually drew people together. And I think the only reason why we made it to the moon first was because Russia sent a man to orbit the planet first. But there's so much technology has grown out of this. I still want to see if there's some Martians over there. So let's go back.
Why did we never go back? I mean, we went back. But what happened? I mean, if you would have said, 45 years ago today, you know what? In the future, we're not going to be going anywhere. What happened?
Funding, priorities, but there's so much beneficial to space exploration. I mean, it means the government actually works on technology that the private sector doesn't have to do.
Okay, Mary Jo Baas.
There were benefits, but the benefit was the journey, not the destination. We're in a whole different place right now. Corporations can do many of the things that government could only dream of back when this happened. I think we have to look with grand ideas and make grand things happen for our country, but our next moon journey might be curing Alzheimer's.
Okay, what do you think, Susie?
I think we're going to go to Mars, and I think we have to if we want to stay a leader in the world. I mean, the United Arab Emirates, they're planning on getting to Mars in, I think it's 2025 or something like that. If you look at the NASA site, it looks like we're going to get there in 2030. It's important.
What's the point? What's there?
On Mars?
Yeah.
Oh, we don't know. That's just it. We're discovering as we go. And if you look at how we're going to get there, there's a whole program to do some orbiting around the moon to discover some of the asteroids to see if we can get a better glimpse into how the solar system happened and really the origins of Earth. And we learn from every one of those findings.
See, I think that the extraordinary thing about what happened 45 years ago was this was, of course, a product of the Cold War. That's obvious. But also it was this culmination of a dream that people had had for millennia. And there's a benefit to having a frontier. There's a benefit of pushing out. And the number of young people who went into the sciences, went into engineering as a result, I don't even know the number. I don't know that anybody does. But also, just because of all of the basic research, all of the technology that was developed from that, not just the military uses, but the peacetime uses. And I think it was unfortunate that we decided that we weren't going to keep going because there was a turning inward. So now we have, you have more power in your smartphone than NASA probably had piloting Apollo 11. I don't know that that's literally true, but I think it's probably close to true. And what are we using it for? We're using it for apps and games
and to spy on each other
and to spy on one another, as opposed to having this joint effort of humanity to push out the limits. Now, what has your glass half full and what has your glass half empty this week? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt, you're first.
My glass is half full because our Milwaukee Brewers, actually half empty because our Milwaukee Brewers ended the first half of the season on a down note. But it's half full because the team still held on the first place in the division, and with a strong second half, will make it to the postseason.
Mary Jo Baas.
My glass is half full because the House passed a bill permanently extending a ban on taxing internet access. My glass is half empty because GovTrack estimates that the bill has about a 42% chance of being enacted.
Susie Falk.
Sure, my glass is half full because we have thousands of Northwestern mutual agents in town for the company's annual meeting, and together they're contributing nearly $13 million to the local economy. My glass is half empty because at the same time, the DOT has shut down the major artery to the Milwaukee Zoo, where the company is hosting many of their events.
Ow. Okay, Brian.
Well, my glass is half empty because President Barack Obama and liberals in Congress are pushing to increase taxes to fund federal transportation fund. But my glass is half full because Republicans like Senator Ron Johnson and Representative Reed Ribble are backing legislation to slash the federal gas tax from over 18 cents a gallon to just under 4 cents a gallon.
Well, my glass is half full because Governor Scott Walker now says he wants to repeal and replace Common Core. It's half empty because the education establishment seems bound and determined to ram it down our throats anyway. Coming up next, we're discussing the criticism over an increase in security costs for Governor Walker and other dignitaries. Last week, Democrats and some in the media jumped on reports that security costs for Governor Scott Walker and his family have risen by 239% in his term. Taxpayers spent more than $2.23 million in 2013 for the state troopers who protect Walker, his family, Lieutenant Governor Rebecca Clayfish, and other dignitaries. Now, state Democrats jumped on the report, calling the increase staggering, noting that it compared to the $657,000 spent on security for former Governor Jim Doyle in 2010. The state Democrat Party demanded that Walker return the money spent on security for out-of-state trips. What they didn't mention were the number of and the tone of the threats against Walker. Now, these might refresh your memory just a little bit. Yeah. So, what are the security costs excessive, Mary Jo Baas?
Absolutely not. Obviously, security costs are going to go up commensurate with the risk. So if you have a state capitol where there's nobody on the lawn one day and 20,000 people screaming and threatening the governor the next day, costs are going to skyrocket. In addition to that, he is also protecting the lieutenant governor, where the previous lieutenant governor had no need of security. There was not this raging crowd.
Mike Tate's statement, though, also that focused on the out-of-state trips, where he might have been selling his book, might have been raising funds, going to the Republican National Convention. Is that legitimate to say that you shouldn't have taxpayers providing security on those trips?
As his stature grows in the country, his costs are going to go up. He's not picking and choosing what his security risks are. He's the governor. We need to protect him.
Okay, Susie Falk.
Yeah, well, I think it is a lot of money that's being spent on security. I think we need to look through the line item and figure out where the money is going. I saw a $600 clothing allowance for the security detail. Really? And then also, I know money's being spent to guard his family, and I think that's really important. But I know his 2 kids are off to college. His wife is home. He's spending more time living in Madison. Yeah. So I think we just need to go line item by line item. In terms of out of state,
yes. How petty and pathetic is it, given what was directed at Governor Walker? How many other governors, how many other political figures have had death threats not only aimed at them, but specifically targeting their wives, specifically talking about stalking their children?
It's heinous.
And what's interesting is that Democrats who contributed so much to this Walker derangement syndrome, who stoked up so much of the ugliness, and who never said squat, never said anything about when they targeted the family and they targeted the house, are now complaining. You're actually complaining about the clothing allowance for the guards. You're actually saying, let's go through.
No, what I'm saying is that we should look through line item by line item as the governor and as the administration does through the budgets. It's just fiscally responsible.
So how many Republicans who are accused of always going after President Obama have said that the president ought to reimburse the taxpayers for Secret Service protection on all of the trips he's taken? Why would it be different for Governor Walker?
As far as I know, that argument hasn't been made on the other side.
Exactly.
Well, Charlie, this is deeply hypocritical by Mike Tate and Democrats and even those in the media that maybe have written editorials about this. Since taking office, President Barack Obama has spent $44.4 million in taxpayer money just on secure travel. That doesn't include the security agents that travel with him. That's the security to travel. Nobody's questioned that, and yet he's gone on vacations to Martha's Vineyard, gone on vacations to Africa, vacations to Europe, vacations to Hawaii. Nobody's complained about it, and of course it's accepted that as the leader of the free world, he's going to get security. It should be accepted that as a leader of Wisconsin, you're going to get security if there's threats against you.
Okay, Mikel Holt.
I hate to admit it, but I actually agree with you. President Obama's, security budget has increased in part because there have been more death threats against him than any president in the history of this country. And I hate to say it, but the same is true of Governor Walker. There have been these threats against his family, his wife. When you get all these threats, you have to expect that, security is going to increase.
Looking back on what happened in 2011, I think one of those stories that continues to rankle people, and when I talked about this on the air, State Senator Alberta Darling called in and said, what we all experienced, the kinds of death threats, the kind of emails, people talking about putting bullets in our head, people calling us every vile name, the fact that we had to have police come to our home. Governor Walker in his book, writes about a letter that was sent to Tonette Walker talking about, I know where your kids go to school. This is an unprecedented circumstance. And for Mike Tate, and you want to talk about, there have been so many lows, but for Mike Tate to try to score some cheap political points off the fact that the State Patrol said, okay, these are the threats and these are what we have to do about it. It's just, I do think it's pathetic. But also, on this issue of the out-of-state travel, the reality is that the threat, because of Walker's profile, does not stop at the state border. No. But I guess we're in an era where we're going to try to litigate everything.
Well, I think that's the point, Charlie. I mean, there seems to be a desire by one political party to emphasize cheap political points here. We have had, as I pointed out, the President of the United States, as a member of the Democratic political party, has traveled outside the country on vacations, or he's traveled a great distance. Nobody's complained about that security. There's no reason. Now, if Governor Walker's campaign actually has reimbursed the state for some security cost in this case. Okay, now you may not want to hear it, but we're going to tell you anyway. Let's hand out some unsolicited advice. Mikel Holt, you're first. Well, mine is Alderman Jo Davis, who is establishing a mayoral exploratory committee. My advice, please make sure the question your committee answers is not whether or not you should run, but rather, can you win? Jo Baas.
My unsolicited advice for the idiots who steal, rob banks, or commit other crimes and then post selfies of their misdeeds. Facebook is not your friend, but it is ours.
Susie Falk.
Dear Milwaukee County Parks, your traveling beer garden is an awesome idea. It's helping Milwaukeeans connect with each other while learning about our heritage and enjoying some of the parks and really good beer. A better idea would be to make these beer gardens permanent and include a wider selection of beers from all of our fine breweries in town.
Yeah, you can't disagree with that. Brian Sikma.
Well, my unsolicited advice is for the State Department of Public Instruction. Records uncovered by State Treasurer candidate Matt Adamczyk show that your employees are spending taxpayer money quite lavishly. You guys may want to trim your spending before the legislature does it for you.
Well, my unsolicited advice is for John Burke, the CEO of Trek and the baby brother of Democratic candidate Mary Burke. Stop trying to pretend that you have no idea how much the Chinese workers who make your bikes are being paid. Nobody, and I mean nobody, believes you. Coming up next, Northwestern Mutual is offering to buy O'Donnell Park for $14 million. So is the deal too good to turn down? An offer too good to turn down. Northwestern Mutual Life has a deal for Milwaukee County. It's offering to buy O'Donnell Park for about $14 million. The company would take over the parking garage, put it back on the tax rolls, and keep the park on top. The county would then use the proceeds to pay off the debt from the park and improve other county parks. NML is planning a new office tower in the area, but some county supervisors are already raising questions about the deal, including the sale price. So, Susie, is this a good deal?
Yeah, I do believe this is a great deal, and I'll tell you why. We have a lot of repair work to do on O'Donnell Park, and someone's going to have to pay for it, and Northwestern Mutual has been an excellent community neighbor. Look, I just talked about all the agents coming into downtown and spending money. I think if we can ensure that part of that parking structure will remain open for public parking, then I think the deal should go through. $14 million seems fair.
Okay, Mikel Holt.
Well, the opposition comes from people like Supervisor Mike Bale, who's asking the question, is this the best we can do? Conversely, I remember the county selling Park East land, which is still vacant. I think they should take the money and run.
Okay. Brian
Well, I
Sikma.
think this is absolutely a good idea for the county, for Northwestern Mutual. It's a good idea for taxpayers because we're offloading a property. There's now a profit loss incentive for Northwestern to operate. I think it's a great idea all around.
Okay, Mary Jo Baas.
I think it's a great idea. It puts the building back on the property tax rolls, $5 million for the parks. And we have to remember, there's no one fighting. There's no one competing with NML to buy this. So
Well,
I think they should take the money
my question.
while
Now,
they can.
I don't want to be the dissenter here, and I really admire NML. I think they're a great corporate citizen. But if this is a great deal, would we be able to determine that by having open bidding in a free market? If it is worth $14 million, I mean, again, $14 million sounds like a reasonable price to me. I agree. But how do you know what the price of something is unless you get multiple bids? I mean, NML is a great corporate citizen. I get that. But are they the only ones that get to bid on this? I mean, why not open it up to competition?
Well, why don't we have the public weigh in on it? And there will be some hearing sessions in the next few weeks. So if we think, if the public thinks that's a good idea, then let's ask for that.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't get it. I do think it's a good idea. I am afraid the Milwaukee County Board will do what it always does, which is screw this thing up. I mean, the Milwaukee County Board could screw up a 2-inch putt, and they probably will. But on the other hand, you want to make sure this is about the most valuable real estate in southeastern Wisconsin.
Yeah, this is a one-shot deal.
This is a one-shot deal. I like the idea of privatizing it. I like the idea of letting the private sector clean up. This has been a total mess, in terms of the public sector. I'd rather have them pick up the tab than the taxpayers. But there may be somebody out there that has a better idea. So what is it that you don't get this week? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt.
Well, if I understand it correctly, the Republicans' answer to immigration problem is to have the National Guard patrol our southern borders. What I don't get is how we can have a serious debate when some folks are offering nonsensical proposals.
Mary Jo Baas.
What I don't get is how Democrat Chair Mike Tate, after feeding the fires of hate and anger and getting rabid anti-Walker nut jobs whipped up during the recall, can criticize Governor Walker for wanting to protect himself and his family.
Susie Falk.
Well, I don't get why Governor Walker decides now to repeal Common Core. Why now? Could this have anything to do with an upcoming election?
Brian Sikma.
Well, what I don't get is why we've not heard more outrage about radical Islamic terrorists in Iraq seizing nuclear material earlier this month. Even though it's a modest amount, the material could quickly exit Iraq and become part of a so-called dirty bomb.
Well, Milwaukee County Board Chairwoman Marina Dmitrievich made $71,000 a year, but as it turns out, almost never shows up to work at the Milwaukee County Courthouse. What I don't get is, what does she do all day? Next on Sunday Insight, our panel picks the winners and losers of the week, but first, here's your morning news update. It's time for our panel to pick the winners and losers of the week. Michael Holt, you're first.
Well, my winners, Senator Cory Booker, and believe it or not, Rand Paul, for introducing the REDEEM Act, federal legislation that helps eliminate barriers to unemployment and re-entry for thousands of prison inmates. My losers, U.S. Congressman. It pains me to say it, but Senator Ron Johnson's lawsuit to force Congress to subscribe to the Affordable Care Act has merit. The congressional effort to circumvent the ACA is not only hypocritical, but it's insulting.
Ooh, mark the tape. Mary Jo Baas.
My winner is Pope Francis for reminding us of our position on immigration. Children coming here must be welcomed and protected. And equally important, economic development in their home countries must occur to keep them from feeling the need to escape to America in the first place. My loser is Common Core. Regardless of any academic merit it may have, as a brand, it has become even more politically toxic than Obamacare.
Yeah, Susie Falk.
Soccer fans in Milwaukee are my winners. Last week's international match at Miller Park, which packed in more than 30,000 fans, it stands to enjoy a chippy match between two incredible teams. It shows that there's a growing love for outdoor professional soccer in Milwaukee. The loser of the week is Malaysian Airlines for losing 2 planes in less than 6 months. My heart breaks for the hundreds of families whose lives have been lost and for the airline and its family of employees.
Brian Sikma.
Well, this week, my winner is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who noted that the difference between Israel and Hamas comes down to, quote, we're using missiles to defend as a defense to protect our civilians, and they're using their civilians to protect their missiles, unquote. My losers this week are pro-Russian separatist fighters in Ukraine. These fighters have indiscriminately shot down several unarmed cargo aircraft, and now this week they shot down a Boeing 777 carrying 298 people. It is time for Russia to stop aiding and enabling such violent and irresponsible behavior.
Well, my winner, American ingenuity. 45 years ago today, we put a man on the moon, and that was back when America wasn't afraid to lead the way. Loser, Mary Burke. Now, Mary Burke wants to raise the minimum wage here to $10.10 an hour for Wisconsin companies that want to hire people in Wisconsin, but her family company has been paying Chinese workers less than $2 an hour. Good luck explaining that, Mary. Thanks for joining us, and join me for my radio show Monday morning. It's on News Radio 620 WTMJ from 8:30 until noon. Have a great weekend.